and several other requirements. Now, the biggest one of these, it's two things. Number one, if the investments are large enough, if the rounds are large enough, and they don't have to be very large at all, the company is going to have to get accountant, CPA reviewed financial statements, or in some cases, audited financial statements. That's typically very expensive. So this is place number one, where I'm hoping that some smart accountant who knows a little bit about software can drive the costs down. Because right now, the cost of an audit would typically be prohibitive for a small investment, a $100,000 investment. It just would. Number two is on the legal side. Because everybody who gets involved in this is going to have potential liability, anti-fraud liability, if you get a bad company that has made some misrepresentations or has just failed to disclose some material facts. Now, what we typically do in these funds, we spend a lot of time doing due diligence and going through the company and making sure that all of its warts are known, all of its problems are disclosed. In fact, if you've ever read a typical prospectus, you should get the idea by the time you're done that you'd have to be out of your mind to put money into this company, all the things that could go wrong. So I know that there's a thought out there that that can be just cookie cuttered, and we'll just say we're just gonna hit the button and print out the template that says here's all the risk with investing in early stage startups. That's not going to be good enough. So somebody or some smart person with an artificial intelligence program is going to have to figure out a way to ferret out all the things that could be material to an investor, so if things go wrong, everybody doesn't get sued. And that's going to be a big expense as well. So that's why I say I think it's going to be a lot of flurry over nothing until somebody solves those problems. But I'm confident somebody will. It's just a matter of time.
So I'm talking coming back to pitching events. I know that pitch and demo events, it's quite often and regularly happening here in Silicon Valley. So if the company will say, well, we're looking for the money, or they will be quiet about it, would they, I don't know, mislead anyone or step on somebody else's toes or regulations?
Yeah, that's always been an area of uncertainty. And unfortunately, I don't have a really good answer for you. We're all still waiting to sort of figure that out. I mean, and it's two things. Number one, at what point is the company advertising or soliciting the sale of securities? And then number two, at what point is it to the public? So, I think traditionally we've hung our hat on two things. Number one, the company wasn't inviting everybody in the audience to come and invest in their company, and they weren't even advertising it. They were having a conversation about who they are and what they do with a select group of panelists. That's number one. And number two, and there's some authority, some legal authority that supported this idea that, well, if it's a closed sort of membership-only group, that's not out to the public. And it can be a pretty big group, even, and it's still not a public advertising or solicitation. But again, we don't have any good hard and fast ground rules. I think the more cautious promoters of these sorts of programs are going to ask the companies, for their own good, to limit their discussion as to the fact that they're raising money if they are in fact in fundraising mode, and any discussion about their securities, what they're offering. For God's sakes, they shouldn't invite people to invest in them while they're doing these pitch events. They never should have done that. But I think people are just going to be very conservative and cautious for the short term.
Sounds like I should hire an attorney on every step I take or every deal I make.
Well, welcome to America. And welcome to California too. This is an area. Securities law is one of those areas where you just can't do it yourself. Now, as you know, Olga, I wrote a book.
Yes,
last year.
And I'm reading that, Dead on Arrival.
Dead on Arrival, How to Avoid Legal Mistakes That Could Kill Your Startup. And I devote and it's a book about the legal mistakes I've seen companies make, particularly startup companies, over the last 30 years. Because I've noticed that companies tend to make the same mistakes over and over and over again. And one of the big mistakes that more and more companies are making now, because it's so easy, is doing it yourself. It's so easy to go online and Google and find resources and decide you're just going to do the legal work yourself. In fact, Well, I don't want to get too anecdotal, but there isn't, 3 days that goes by before I don't find somebody who has tried to form their own corporation or tried to do their own stock issuance or tried to sell their own securities, and they've missed something subtle, something counterintuitive. And it's especially true in this valley because I'm surrounded by the smartest people in the world. We have engineers, we have professors, we have doctors, we have people who come here from other countries, the creme de la creme, in effect. And these are people who are used to just figuring out everything themselves and understanding everything. And by God, they're smart enough. They can go online and they can read about it. But the trouble that people don't quite understand is that the law is not engineering. It's not software. It's created by man, not by nature. There are no rules of nature that govern. A lot of it is driven by policy. And if you've ever been to Washington and watched Congress in action, if you're watching the Senate in action now, you should have a little bit of concern about trying to second guess what the law that would come out of a body like that might be like. So there's a lot of policy concerns that underlies these rules. So I will give you an example of just today, in fact. Somebody has gone to the SEC themselves that I know, and they've gotten their own determination that what they're doing doesn't violate any of these rules that we just talked about. Well, on close examination, I left out a couple of facts that they didn't know was significant because they haven't been talking to the SEC for 30 years. But basically, it's the kind of thing that you really need to consult experts if you're going to do securities law. The consequences are quite draconian if you get it wrong, and that's the big thing. I can introduce you to people that are sitting in jail right now that are as guileless as they come, but they just messed up on securities laws. And if you mess up on securities laws, it could be a crime, right? Certainly they got civil liability, but it also could be a crime. So it's not the kind of thing, that even the most feckless among us would want to undertake without guidance. I wouldn't do do-it-yourself brain surgery. I wouldn't do do-it-yourself heart surgery, and I certainly wouldn't do do-it-yourself securities compliance.
And I would like to show that book in front of our cameras at least. That's one of the book, Dead on Arrival, especially for startups, well recommended. It's going around, and I saw a lot of Russian and non-Russian reading this book. So
oh, really? We should have a Russian version, maybe.
Maybe we should translate it. And a lot of Russians who are here, of course, we all speak English, or we learn English very fast. And if you want to show this for the YouTube camera, that would be good. And then I would like to, in the end of our program, thank you for coming, by the way, and updated us on all these legal issues. I know just to come to the attorneys, it's cost a lot of money, and receive all these new titles and regulations. That's a lot of headaches and paperwork you have to read, and it always goes to some other laws, like maybe 30 years or 80 years old. So thank you for coming and update us on that.
Thank you, Olga. It's good to be here.
And then, what would you like to wish this time to our listeners and viewers?
What would I like to wish to your listeners and viewers? Well, prosperity and success, of course. I hope your company gets funded. And I hope your
with
product,
accredited investors?
Yes, I hope your company gets funded with accredited investors. I hope your product goes viral. And I hope we all become billionaires.
Yes, and we all will live happy life forever after, right?
Right.
Like happy end to all, not maybe end, beginning. It's a new beginning of a better regulated life where people will know where's the money coming from and if it's ready to be invested in other adventures and companies. Well, on that said, thank you, Roger Royce, for coming, actually for making this program available for our startups and for those who thinking to have their business. Still start the business, but don't forget to talk to attorneys before you do that. That's my advice. I learned that hard ways, but you're gonna learn it easy ways. Anyway, thank you for listening to Olga Show, and we'll talk to you later. Every Saturday night we are here with you, and see you around.